everyone, and welcome to TelecomTV's main agenda super panel, hosted once again at the fabulous Lohman Museum in Den Haag in the Netherlands. We are kindly sponsored once again by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and Intel, and the topic of this evening's panel is No NFV, No 5G. Let me introduce our expert guests. And on stage I have, from my left, Markus Brunner, who is Chief Researcher and Head of Standardization at Swisscom. Welcome again, Markus.
Hi.
Renu Navale, who is Senior Director, Networks Platform Group at Intel. Hi. Welcome, Renu. Diego Lopez Garcia, who is Head of Technology Exploration and Standards at Telefonica. Welcome, Diego.
Hello.
Jean Savy, who is Executive Leader, All IP and On-Demand Networks Program at Orange.
Nice
Welcome.
to be here.
And finally, but by no means least, Domenico Convertino, who is Head of OSS BSS at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to kick things off with a few questions myself first, and then we're going to invite members of you, the audience, to participate during the actual panel discussion. I've got a microphone here, and I'll be wandering around and hoping to get as many questions asked and answered as we possibly can in the time we have. Let's start, though, by just reminding ourselves of a recent TelecomTV survey on the evolution to 5G. One of the interesting points that came out of that was 83% of CSPs who participated agreed that NFV was very important to 5G networks. Now, that sounds pretty overwhelming, but what does our audience think? So, come on, let's have a show of hands, first of all. All those of you who, at this moment in time, believe NFV is very important to 5G, please raise your hands. Quick count here. Yes. Great. Okay, I have a number. All those who don't, raise your hands. Oh. Who would have thought that? Well, that's pretty overwhelming. So, on to question one. The first and most obvious question, really, is what is it about the 5G standard? And I know Release 15 is out, and there's a lot more 5G goodness still to come from Release 16. But what is about the 5G standard that would necessitate CSPs adopting NFV? Domenico, let's start with you and go down our guests.
But I think that we can have different use cases in 5G that will require virtualization. But at the end of the day, the entire 5G is related to the real ability to cloudify a number of network functions that we have in the mobile network. And basically, there is no cloudification without virtualization. So it's just a prerequisite to get there. So the real question we should ask to ourselves is not if NFV is needed. The real question is if virtualization is enough, or we need even more than that in order to be effective on 5G.
Jean, our first operator on the panel.
Yeah, I would say also that it depends on the use case, because probably the first use case, and a kind of a joke, is only 5 is greater than 4, meaning the enhanced mobile just throughput. And one second big use case is the mobile for fixed, that is already quite a buzz in the US. So this probably okay with virtualization. I mean, it brings the same benefits as the virtualization brings as large. But if we want to focus on the 5G real differentiation against 4G, it's with the slicing. And then with the slicing, indeed, it needs the virtualization. And that's the real deadline and the real use cases where I consider that it's mandatory, more or less, to bring virtualization in the 5G advent.
Well, we're going to come on to use cases soon, hopefully. Diego.
Well, let me tell a very short story. When I joined Telefonica 6 or 7 years ago, I was really astonished about the crazy architecture that it was implemented by the network operators. We have in the best case, we have two actually separated networks. I think that precisely the real promise of 5G is trying to converge those architectures, having the network sustainable by means of having a single infrastructure that can be sliced and shared and adapted to the different use cases and the different requirements. And that implies that either you have it with NFV or you won't have it at all.
And Renee?
Yeah, and I think I agree with all what they said. And one of the discussions I was having with one of my colleagues who's on the cloud data center side, I was asking them to draw some parallels in the journey that the cloud industry took. I said, hey, what was the journey that you guys took in terms of, was it, virtualized all of a sudden? Was it a prerequisite to cloud native? Do they coexist? And I think they have gone through a similar journey. They still have, virtualization as a prerequisite for cloudification. They have cloud native, bare metal. They coexist, and it completely depends on the use cases. And I think we are looking to adopt a lot of those learnings and technologies into the networking space. And I think we can learn more by looking at, hey, how have they coexisted in the cloud domain, and also understand, does it kind of map similarly to the networking domain, or is it completely different?
Right. And Marcus?
So I think from a technology perspective, you could easily run 5G radio without virtualization. But from a business perspective, I don't see where the business is coming from. If you start doing 5G, there's a lot of promises around the slicing, about flexibility, about cost matters, what NFV helps, more customization, and so on and so forth. I think all of that capabilities which are promised by 5G are only achievable through NFV as well.
Are there any examples? Can a CSP achieve one of the short-term goals, maybe enhance capacity and more bandwidth by using 5G without NFV, maybe 5G new radio? Is there any logical or compelling case why you would launch 5G now and regardless of NFV?
That depends. I mean, if you entered something that's recently happened, is this race for declaring victory on 5G. So, and we are the first ones. Maybe yes. I mean, if you want to declare victory ahead your competitors and other countries or continents or whatever, because you are going to be the first, that depends on what you call 5G. If you want to call 5G, as Marcus was saying, higher bandwidth with radio, yes, sure. But whether that's 5G or not is something that remains to be seen.
I mean, from our side, we sort of just did the NFV port already, so there's no, this question is not a question for us. So it's sort of natural way. We already cashed in on some of the benefits of NFV today, and we hope more to come.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a couple of examples like that where for a short term, I think it makes sense. It was in the case of industrial control. One of our customers is a industrial customer, and for them, they want to host just a private network within the factory automation scenario, want low latency for their factory equipment. And I think all they're looking for is really connectivity back to the kind of the bigger LTE network. So for them, from a short-term perspective, for low latency, insights and control, it does make sense. But this is kind of it's a very contained factory use case, and not really, represents kind of the entire network. But if you are looking at the entire network, then you do want to look at it beyond just short-term goals.
Probably we should also honestly talk about the industry maturity, because we talk about 5G as a whole, but in fact you have the core that is probably fair enough or mature enough to be virtualized today, and yet to have some benefits from this particular scope. And then you have the RAN, the radio access network, that also is meant to be virtualized, but probably not with the same maturity as this stage. And that's the end-to-end virtualization that will bring the whole promise, that will bring the slicing capabilities and so on. But maybe we should acknowledge that we do not have the same maturity also. So probably it will be a progressive implementation.
And the progressive implementation will be probably driven by the business priorities. We have North America already suffering for the spectrum being saturated. So for them, it's just a way to give more bandwidth and more data consumption to their customers. We have cases like the industrial case that was mentioned a few minutes ago, right? Where at the end of the day we are speaking about enabling a more effective edge computing in specific industrial applications, right? So this will probably dictate the agenda. So and at the end, the readiness of the technology will become probably a consequence of the priorities that we will face in the near future, right?
Marcus, you want to add?
The projects we have done on the industry side, all of them require some sort of cloud type of technology, whether it's really NFV or not, we can discuss. But some sort of that is sort of a must from our customers' perspective as well.
Well, look, we promised more audience participation in this super panel, so here's an opportunity to get the first question in, or one or two questions. Do we have any thoughts and opinions at this stage from any of our audience members? Any takers for early question? Come on, there's bound to be one of you somewhere. Oh, there's a hand at the back. Wonderful. I'm heading your way, sir. I'm coming behind you. If you could just stand up and if you could stand up so the camera can see you, and just say your name and company, and then...
you're going to hold that for me?
Yeah, there you
go. Kevin Woods from Lumina Networks. So a lot of times when we talk about 5G, we think about new stuff, NFV, new equipment, new radio, new things. How much of the problem pertains to making some of this technology work on legacy equipment, existing equipment? Take network slicing as an example. Is that something that's going to be just deployed on new things, or is that going to be deployed on existing equipment? And if so, how are you going to solve that problem?
First taker? Marcus?
Let me make a sort of comment. We are just now in the phase of rolling out some of the 3GPP-based IoT network technology, and that you can regard already as a slice. And with all the problems and missing standard features, we had to sort of work on get it up and running, specifically if it came to sort of charging issues on that. And I guess many people around here had similar problems. So in that sense, it's sort of, the slicing depends a bit on how far you go with the term slice and how much are the requirements to the slice. But in general, we already started doing that on the old equipment or semi-old equipment. I don't think we are able to do that on the GSM network though, but we're going to turn it off anyway.
You've talked about use cases already. You brought up use cases and how the dependency on use cases, it all depends on what the application and what the service is going to be. What 5G functions and use cases are so dependent on virtualization then? Which network slicing, intelligent edge, when might we start to see these in commercial operation, and how dependent upon NFV, and what state of NFV infrastructure needs to be in place?
Well, when it comes to use cases, let me say one thing. I think that there is a main and basic use case that this is about the sustainability of the network infrastructure. It's something that right now the pressure on the one hand, on the higher and higher demand of, even if we're talking about sheer bandwidth, nothing more than it, is something that is pushing, this famous curve in the moment that the costs and the revenues will cross. And precisely one of the few weapons that we have left is precisely having unifying infrastructure and having everything managed and sharing that infrastructure, or even prolonging somehow the lifetime of the infrastructure by reusing it for lower priority or lower demanding, or less demanding services. So this is, I mean, and I think this is essential because otherwise the network infrastructures will become not sustainable. Apart from that, well, if you take this at the beginning, any use case you can think of as requiring this, I tend to believe that in any case, if we're talking about particular ones, there are several, let's say, unexplored territories that are related precisely with industrial services and whatever it has been right now, the domain of very local networks that were not interconnected widely or globally, in which precisely without virtualization probably it would be very complicated to get in.
So I think when I think of use cases from a 5G perspective that could be one of the first that gets deployed, I think of cloud gaming. So typically, it's always been, the media formats, the multiple media formats, the large data files, they've always been transcoded and processed in the cloud, rendered remotely. But increasingly, we're seeing, especially for online gaming, if they want lower latency, it's moving towards the edge. And I think cloud gaming is going to be one of those first use cases that gets deployed at the edge for lower latency. And there are, a large number of gamers out there that will want those fast response times. And I think you'll start to see more of cloud gaming being deployed with 5G.
I mean, for us, it's relatively easy. So the first use case is normal broadband, sort of a bit more of what everybody knows already. On the other hand, we see very good discussions, let's say, with anything which is sort of a bit more mission critical, from blue light organizations to train type of things, where today you have a dedicated network. So with a slice, there's pretty much of a business case. If you can handle a sort of a dedicated network and replace it with a slice, I think the business case is easy to calculate.
Jen?
Yeah, I'm puzzled to hear the business case is easy because as far as the edge is concerned, the business case is not that easy, and we struggle to find the use cases. You quoted gaming, but maybe it's the IoT, but which vertical specifically? Because IoT is quite vague, quite enormous range. So probably we need a few specific use cases and specific verticals to make it happen from the economic standpoint and to justify this business case to deploy to the edge, which obviously is needed if we talk about the latency, if we talk about new classes of service or new profile of service we need in the infrastructure. So from my standpoint, I think it's today this tricky point, whereas the enhanced mobile broadband is quite obvious and will be probably the first stage as soon as the frequencies are sold by the states. Obviously,
at a reasonable price. That's
at a reasonable price.
Reasonable price indeed. Domenico?
Yeah, first thing first, the standards have been closed a few months back, right? Few weeks back, actually. So, a couple of things. First thing, I don't think that any mobile operator is planning to decommission any legacy network because 5G is introduced. So I will go back to what Diego was saying. I mean, my point of view is that we need to find the economical sustainability of this new technology. The economical sustainability comes from an operational excellence that we need to pursue, because the model that we had in the past will not make it sustainable for the future, will not make sustainable another technology according to the way to operate we are used to. So this is a fact, okay? So before looking at the use cases, we need to look even at the cost structure and at the efficiency that we are having managing this new technology. But then there is another thing that is happening in parallel, right? It's more related to the regulators, to the auction of the spectrum. So in my country, I'm Italian, so in my country, last week, mobile operators ended up paying billions to the government for the spectrum, right? So I expect that this will accelerate the process as well, because it's cash that is going out of the industry, and we need all together to work to accelerate, the return on this huge investment that is done in these days.
Marcus.
There are probably two words on two comments I was hearing here. So that the edge, I was not referring to anything edge. I think you were referring more to the gaming part, because as Swisscom and as a small country and a small operator, we are the edge. So it's not like that big of a deal. So for our NFV is already an edge deployment, you can say. The second point is really also a Swiss phenomena is on the regulatory side, but more not the frequency as such, but the electromagnetic emissions. So we have a massive issue on that, at least in Switzerland. I think Italy is a bit in the same league on some of that.
When something becomes in fashion, it becomes in fashion everywhere. Yeah. Yes.
So the issue there is really there we might really reform spectrum, because 5G is expected to be much more efficient than 2G with the same energy we can blow into the air. So there is a case for reforming or turning off some barriers, some systems, and so on.
Right, let's go back to the audience. Who wants to join in the fun? Who's got? Oh, there's a comment in the front row here. Again, if you could just stand up, I'll just come behind you and just hold that there. You should say your name and company for everyone. That'd be great.
All right, good evening. I'm Manish Singh from Tech Mahindra. And my question to the panel is, for 5G, is virtualization enough, or do we need to go beyond and start to look even further disaggregation, containerization, etc.? And building on that, do you see the industry is trending in the right direction, or are we swinging the pendulum back towards vertical virtualization, or as you said today, fake virtualization?
Thanks, Manish. I think Manish has been reading my question list here, because I've got those exact questions coming up. Oh, this is a good one. Who wants to?
Thanks for quoting me, by the way. Yeah, I think it's worth going beyond virtualization and going to containers and so on, but for sure it's the cloud native stage, so it's of course the end promise that we will have at this end. But nevertheless, I'm quite convinced that it's not feasible, it's not realistic, and it's not the benefit of the ecosystem to try to leapfrog to the container advent without industrializing the current stage with, let's say, pure VM or such. So,
Diego.
It's just a word of warning that, this industry consumes buzzwords as people watching the Super Bowl consume buffalo wings. It's something that we, it's amazing because you think about, no, virtualization is not enough. Well, come on, virtualization, if we talk about making something based on software that can move around and live in a software-based environment, that's a VM, that's a container, that's a serverless thing, that's whatever. From time to time, I would like to see a little bit more stability in our terminology, not in the technology, because from time to time we fall to this temptation of saying, no, this is not the thing. The new thing is this other thing that I will call X, Y, and Z, because it's dangerous. For example, this particular thing, this particular aspect about the fake virtualization, I remember there was a presentation from a colleague of yours some time ago complaining about that precisely. They called them that in the moment it was vertical integration and horizontal integration, something like that. This was Christos, which is the name? Christos Kolias. And it was something that we perceived from the beginning. I mean, it's something that, well, for sure, there is a pushback. And it's a natural one because you are defending your investments. It's not that there are evil vendors and nice and good operators. That is true, on the other hand. But it's not about that right now. It's simply that I can understand if you have been spending resources for 10 years to build a software base, develop it, run it on a particular hardware, on a particular style, and ways of optimizing, etc. And somebody comes and says, no, forget about it, you have to make it cloud native. Well, first, you're going to lose your competitive advantage. And second, probably you are going to deliver much poorer products for a while. So you do what I would say are legitimate tricks. And well, more or less try to satisfy and move slower than it would be desirable. That's natural, on the other hand. So, well, I think this is part of the, let's say, of the evolution of technology and in an industry. Don't forget it. Networking industry is quite mature right now. We are providing an amazing service. An amazing and sustained service worldwide. And this is something that, well, we have to be careful.
Okay, let's hear from the vendors.
No, I tend to agree that people who are having more an IT culture or a cloud culture are looking at something more than virtualization to happen. And I agree, so it will happen, but it will take time. It will take time because 4 years ago we were thinking that VNF were going to be deployed in 6 months, 9 months, and whoever was speaking about appliance was, like the Flintstone, was a guy coming from a couple of centuries back, right? While today there is a lot of fake virtualization, and each of us probably would be happy to see more real virtualized stuff in the network. So I believe that these things will happen, but it will take time. Trying to push these too strong or try to put these as a must-have in order to start is not going to help the industry. The industry needs to start proving the benefit of a more open, less monolithic type of network and architecture, and then things will come on their own afterward.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what our three colleagues here said. I do believe that, we have too many buzzwords because I think sometimes we've been asked, should I completely discard NFV? Should I just restart with cloud native? And you realize that that's not possible. I think it's going to be extremely use case dependent. It's going to be dependent on the maturity of which part of the network, maturity of the customer themselves, who's deploying the network, and for the end customer. And also, depending on the particular type of use case, they might coexist. You might have a continuum where, bare metal, NFV, cloud native, they all kind of coexist in order to, deliver upon kind of the promise of I think one of my colleagues was mentioning like a disaggregated horizontal cloud.
Marcus?
Yeah, so I think I should start with a story when I joined the ETSI NFV discussion in one of the first meetings. I said, gosh, what are these guys talking about? Virtualization, that's already sort of a years old type of stuff. Now we go into telecom space. On the way, I realized that the telecom industry was just not able to adopt anything more cloud native from the very start. And there are good reasons, there are good features in the virtualization part, which we need. So I think it's going to be a sort of a dual or both things. I mean, there are certain applications, certain use cases which need a much more cloud native, much more a platform type of approach, where other use cases need a much more virtualization type of setup because of isolation, because of security, because of other features.
Because it's not, at the end of the day, it's not just the way you develop the software, right? It's not just the way you write the network function. At the end of the day, there is an impact on the operational processes, there is an impact on the people, it requires completely different skills. So it's a huge transformation, it's a huge business transformation for the telco industry. So it's not just to adopt Docker rather than OpenStack or whatever else religious battle we want to take on a single technology, right?
And even the cloud providers, it coexists even for the cloud providers. They're not completely cloud native. They have, other virtualized, or more OpenStack-like environments, and they have, kind of the containerized Kubernetes type of environment. So it's not one or the other, even with the cloud providers.
Yeah, and I don't think we should discriminate 5G against other use cases, fixed one that we already apply to the B2B business, for example. I think it's the same question. The discrimination is by the use case and the agility that it brings along, but not by the technology or the access type. Is it 5G? Is it fixed? Is it...
We're on a roll. The audience is on a roll. So let's get back to the audience. Any more questions from our esteemed audience here tonight? Anyone wants to pick up a question? Oh, in the far corner. I'm coming over. Very safely. Let me get behind. And your name and company, sir?
Hi, I'm Breen Madden. I work for Intel. So I'm going to direct this question towards our comm service providers, OpenStage. We speak an awful lot about infrastructure here and a lot of the challenges with regards to infrastructure and how we need to overcome them. But one mindset that we see in the industry as well is that the application comes first, the service comes first. Do you believe that there is a need for more developer focus within our industry around what are the applications that are going to be pervasive in the 5G era? And I'm primarily looking at edge services because I think everybody is seeing that as a big opportunity. And if you do see it as an opportunity, what do you recommend the industry does about it?
Thank you. Okay, to one of our service providers. Which one of our service providers wants to have a crack?
You already partially answered this morning, so... No, yes, we need more developers, we need more software, we need more software culture, we need more fresh brains into the industry, bringing different way of working, different way of thinking, ability to work together, ability to cooperate across different departments, all things that the industry is not used at. But the problem is that there are not so many of these people around, and the problem is even the ability of the industry on attracting these people. So I think we all know that we need to incentivize more young people on taking responsibility and on being more exposed. We were having a discussion a few minutes ago, right, before the panel with Marcus, exactly on this topic. I was taking this example. If a telco is working agile DevOps or is adopting real CI/CD, right, and you pick up a new graduate, he will feel himself in the same environment or in a similar environment as at the university, right? And he will immediately perceive the value of what he has, what he's delivering. He will immediately feel engaged with the company. And just reflect with our first job. Probably we have been sent by our first company into a 3 weeks crash course to understand the company culture, and then trainings on the next technology, and then the other training, and then being parked as a junior guy in a project that hopefully will go live in 18 months. And this is for the neograduate, for the young talents we have in the world today. This is not the way to attract them. So it's not only more software developer, it's even different way to operate that probably will help attracting more of these talents, more of these people. Yeah.
Diego, come on, you and I were talking about this morning.
Well, probably my body language was a little bit clear. I don't think that is a so good idea to spoil engineers, basically. I mean, it's work, and they're expected to work hard. And well, at the end, there are anonymous pay every month or every week, whatever they are paid. No, seriously, I think that there is still, and it's something that I insist very much, there is still a lot of talent right now in many of the organizations. And this talent is in a dark stage. is a talent that we have not found yet, because and this is true, the structures of the companies, mostly of the operators, and maybe of the big manufacturers and the like, are too rigid, too much oriented to the old way of doing things, the hierarchy, the processes, the RFI, the RFP, the RFQ, and the bargaining procedures, things like that, and deep marketing studies, whether a service can be launched or not, because you need at least the guarantee that 1 million users are going to commit to it. And these things are, the problem is that changing organizational cultures is something that is complicated. But I think we should start precisely by that moment and trying to changing the organization, being brave enough, and this is something that always is, it's very easy to say and difficult to do. But it's being brave enough to start changing and to start changing the organization, because let me insist, I have the feeling that we have many talent that is right now hidden inside our organizations and that we could take advantage of.
Yeah, so in the Swisscom case, that's what this discussion I had. He was saying, oh, cool, in Swisscom there are a lot of young people working. And I said, I have not detected that.
Yes.
not belonging to that sort anymore. But in Swisscom, we have a sort of, first of all, we have a competition against Googles and Amazons, and so IBM's sitting in Switzerland. So there is a certain competition there. Second, when starting from this year on, we moved the whole infrastructure department, almost the whole infrastructure department, into the agile way of working. So we have really put in place all this. We use the scaled agile framework, sort of people probably, some of them know, some have applied it. So we have really implemented that. So the agility part is sort of there, with all the problems still around, really implementing it. But it's time and we need to fix some of it, but I think that's okay. On the software side as well, we are sort of very in a fortunate situation that we always have done some IT. We've always done some development of software ourselves. Not all of it, but still a certain part of it. So we have that know-how and knowledge sort of in-house. We can sort of decide on a case-by-case basis how we do something, in what type of setup we are doing it.
But I agree, we have a problem of attractivity or attractiveness. I don't know the English word. Maybe it's just a rebranding issue, and we should talk about the cloudification rather than about the virtualization. I suspect that we have this, and we must acknowledge this question of attractiveness. And nowadays, the hype is around the artificial intelligence also.
Jump.
No, that's precisely the idea. In the moment you explain this to the young engineers, or you go to a computer science school or whatever, in the moment you explain them what we are doing, and you explain them the challenges ahead, and you show them the kind of things that they could be doing, I don't think it's so difficult, but they had to know. That's the problem. And this is something that is missing as well, that is precisely, and this is something I'm really trying really hard, that is about to enhance our connection with universities and schools. So we have people working in the universities for us from the beginning, so they know what we are doing, which are the new ways of doing things, and then they will become more eager to join.
Renew.
First of all, I think the apps, the applications and services are most important, right? Because they provide the business case for the entire infrastructure evolution. They should inspire the infrastructure, and the infrastructure should kind of evolve to support these applications and services. And when you look at the edge, what we found is that there was a study that was done where we have hundreds of thousands of cloud developers versus, I think there was 5,000 edge developers. So the numbers are really drastic in favor of cloud developers. So one of the things we should look at is when we create or transform the edge compute platforms, we do need to look at plugins to plug into some of the cloud frameworks. That's one. We should look at, hey, how do we support paradigms like function as a service? Because you're going to see a lot of developers start to use paradigms like function as a service for applications and services. So we need to evolve to kind of support some of these things so that we can attract the wider cloud developer community to develop applications and services that can run on, the operator edge platforms as well?
We are approaching the end of our panel, but before we get there, I want to ask a couple more questions. I want to bring it back, if I can, to NFV and 5G, which is where we started. Do you think the adoption of NFV in CSP networks is happening at the rate required to support 5G deployments? 5G seems to have those operators want to go fast and first. There are those that have very precise time scales to stick to. Is NFV happening fast enough and correctly enough, or is there anything more we as an industry do to support this? Diego. Go on. Jan.
Sure.
You're both advocates here.
I think we have a very narrow window here with the virtualization before the 5G advent. And we must really use it or even speed it to industrialize this virtualization stage. Because, yes, the next step is continuous, and yes, it will be a new set of promises or benefits. But here, we must stick on this step we are in, industrialize it, and before the 5G event, because it's already a huge step in terms of reskilling, in terms of changing the business models, in terms of, let's say, learning curve as a whole. And before engaging the next one, I think it's wise really to use this window and not to miss this window, because it's quite narrow, by the way.
Narrow window of opportunity.
Yeah. So, as said before, we are embarked NFV for quite some time. I think we have something like 3 years of experience of operating NFV-based services. So we had sort of a bit of a head start in the learning phase. For us, it's a no-brainer that this comes like that, and I'm relatively positive for a first 5G deployment that we are ready also on the NFV side. So everything fine.
I would say that yes. If you look at the original prospects that we had when we started this all, is something about fast transformation, something's going to happen in a couple of years, we are going to shorten all cycles, etc. Well, then reality kicks in, and then you hear about the amortization of the equipment, and you tell people that you have to go for an investment to change something that was bought 1 year ago and that is working, which doesn't make any sense. So at the end, we are at a reasonable pace. We are, in general, probably some of us are ahead, some others are behind, for sure. But this is something that is going as it would be reasonable, taking into account all the conditions we have. But I agree with Joan is that there is a window that we cannot miss. If we miss that window, things will happen in a different way, and that different way probably will not be pleasant at all.
I was having this discussion again with one of my cloud colleagues, as in, hey, how long did the cloud industry take, to be virtualized and containerized and et cetera? And she felt like we were taking some of these technologies and trying to literally fast forward it in the networking industry. So I think as an industry also, we need to be kind to ourselves and patient. It's not something we can just transform in a matter of 2 years or 3 years. It does take time. It took time even in the cloud industry. I know they've evolved further ahead than we are right now, but it did take a long time even in the cloud industry. So it's going to take time even in the networking industry. And I think we as an industry need to be more patient with ourselves.
Okay. Domenico?
I have a slightly different view. For me, the NFV, the virtualization is not the finish line. This industry has two priorities. to automate more and to monetize more, okay? The good of the virtualization is that may help both of them. Because thanks to virtualization, it's more easy to automate, and thanks to virtualization, we can have more flexibility and composability, and we can probably speed up the service creation and help the monetization. Now, the time window that my colleagues were describing before is exactly the time we have to prove that certain things can work in very 4G or 4.5G scenarios before 5G is coming. But whatever we are proving needs to be focused on the fact that we need to automate more or we need to facilitate the monetization. It's not just to prove the technology as the technology, because going back to what Diego opening the entire panel, right? It is not sustainable otherwise. We have a problem of sustainability. So the automation is key. And we need to prove if the case is Mac, for example, good. The case is Mac where we prove certain things, but at the end of the day, we need to demonstrate that we can automate more and we can make easier to monetize the investments.
Great. We have one final opportunity for a last question from our audience. Oh, gentleman in the middle, I'm coming your way. Your name and job company, please, sir.
Hi there, my name's Andrew Coward from Lumina. I'd like the panel, if they may, to put on their sales hats for the last question. And if you do so, the question is, what would you say to an enterprise customer to convince them to spend new money on your new 5G virtualized service? What would that one thing you'd say to them be?
Oh, who's going to put the sale hat on first?
In general, I mean, that depends very much on the customer, but basically, it's about you will be able to do things that you have never thought you could. And that's basically the idea, is that you can address, because it's not about that you, I mean, if you tell a customer you're going to go for a new brand service just to see videos in higher resolution in your tiny screen on your phone, but if you tell them that you can, for example, you can integrate your factory with your stores all over the country and coordinate the movements of your trucks, that to me makes sense. It's not that then it comes with the game of prices and benefits and all the like, but it's something that or you go to a hospital or to an emergency team and tell them about reaching out to people in danger in the case of an emergency, because you can easily deploy an elastic edge on top of the area. So I think there are cases that are easy. Then when it comes to the price, is whether they are willing to pay for that. So that's another story.
Yes, this is the point. Because if I may comment, because as HP we have often contacts with the CIO, with IT manager. I think the problem is the opposite. CIO and IT manager, they know very well what they are looking from the CSP today. They have a very clear idea. They want much more flexible connectivity, and they want many more over-the-top services on top of the connectivity. And they can list today. If you go to many of them, they have already a clear picture of what they want. The problem of the industry is that how much do they want to pay? How much do they want to pay, and how much the industry on the other side is ready to stay into a certain price structure, okay? So I think the end customer, especially on the B2B, they have a very clear idea and very clear requests and cases already.
So the one requirement that I've heard come up repeatedly from the enterprise perspective, besides low latency, real-time control, and machine-to-machine communication, is actually data sovereignty and security. So a lot of the big enterprises want a lot of their data on premise. They're extremely concerned with the security and privacy of that data, and are very much interested in kind of the 5G edge scenarios where their data can be protected and remain on-premise for the enterprises. So from what are they willing to pay for? They are willing to pay for that data sovereignty and security.
So probably, I mean, the example I was talking about in this Industry 4.0 type of use case we were doing, I mean, the business case is completely stupid. It's sort of throw away copper cables and put in wireless. Has nothing to do with 5G, but you need a certain reliability, certain guarantees, and sort of managed by somebody able to manage networks. That's it.
Last chance for a comment before we wrap the panel up. Any more takers? Are we good? Thank you, Andrew, for the question. Well, that is all the time we have for this evening, unfortunately, because we could go on forever. It's a fascinating discussion and great debate. May I thank all our panelists this evening, Marcus, Renu, Diego, Jan, and Domenico. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
A big thank you also to our sponsors, of course, HPE and Intel, and to all of you, our audience, who really made this very interactive and very engaging and very enjoyable. So thank you very much, everyone. Good evening.